Hi, welcome to Kitchen Chats. I'm your host, Aimee Kandrac, and today I have with me my friend and author, Dawn McCord, and she has a book that she has recently released called Chasing Carson that we are going to be able to dive into a lot today. But before we get started, Dawn, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
So I like to ask all of my guests the same first question.
Okay.
Which is, as we sit here in my kitchen,
Yes.
I wonder if you have a kitchen moment that you're willing to share with our listeners.
I do. I mean, I have tons of kitchen moments. But in regards to my book and our story, our journey with Carson. So the book Chasing Carson is a family's journey through adolescence, addiction, and recovery. And as we started chasing him through his teen years, as his substance use progressed, which started out as experimentation, like most adolescents, it just quickly progressed. So we chased him through his high school years, and then we get to the point where he needs more than what our city can offer, and so my cousin comes over. Is it okay if I read from the book?
That'd be fine.
Okay. So my cousin comes over, and because I at this point have had, friends and family, looking at all these places all over the country. And so my cousin comes over because she was one of the ones doing research, and she's realizing how expensive it's going to be, and insurance doesn't cover a lot of it. So she walks in, and I'm standing in the kitchen, and, in between clients, I'm doing research, and she says to me, so I'll just read from the book. It says, "Our team, with all their researching for us, has figured out the cost of the long-term treatment programs. And my cousin tells me we should look into doing a GoFundMe to help pay for the cost. I reply to her that Sloan will not go for it. He is so private. She says, Dawn, people want to help. You don't need a casserole. Give them a chance to. And I say, okay, I'll talk to Sloan. In the meantime, she talks with the rest of the family, and they all decide to gift us money to help. Sloan and I are overwhelmed by their generosity. It's so very humbling."
Wow.
Yeah. So that's something standing at the kitchen counter.
I want to give you the opportunity to share about, the journey getting Carson to where he needs to be, obviously, but so humbling in the middle of this massive crisis. Mm-hmm. When your family comes in and says, please let us help you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we were to the point where we were like, we don't know what to do. Besides, well, that was the beginning of it, when we were realizing, and researching the cost of programs, and that it's not just going away for 3 months and then coming home and everything's all rainbows and Skittles. That's to quote Carson. And it's not that he was going to have aftercare as well. So we were planning on him being gone for a year at the very least. Mm-hmm. So what does that look like?
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. So between family and friends and this GoFundMe and us, refinancing the house.
Addiction can really get in a lot of this. And one of the things that you mentioned right there was how private your husband was with all of this. Mm-hmm. And that has to make it hard.
It was.
Harder.
Yes.
But it's also such it's not, oh, somebody has breast cancer. I know how to take them a casserole. Mm-hmm. Oh, someone just had surgery. I know that they need X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you probably, I'm assuming, like there's just a whole new way of how do you tell everyone what's going on? The stigma around that. And then the help that you need is such a different level.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely. And once I did talk to Sloan, I said, look, Kelly had come over and talked and said, look, this is what we're looking at. And I don't see any other option. Do you? And he says no. And because by this time, the reason we were looking, if I didn't mention this earlier, the reason we were looking is he had already gone through 3 times while he was currently in our local recovery hospital, and twice before that, with even a stint overnight in jail, and nothing was working. You know, you would think, a lot of people think of the rock bottom. And and even us, we were thinking, it's going to happen. And finally, even the counselors at Fairbanks said, it's just not long enough. And one, it's private because we have to tell everybody why we need money, why we need lots of money. And we'd already kind of, because people did know after the first or the second time in rehab that Carson was struggling. And because I think we're not educated enough, our schools, our homes are not educated enough on the disease of addiction, that we formed this bias that it's something they can control, or it's something the parents can control. Mm-hmm. Now, mind you, all kids will experiment, and not it's only 10% of the population that have a substance use disorder that will be like Carson. So it's not to scare everybody, but at the same time, you know, you still have to get a handle on it. But the thing is that there's such shame and stigma around it. You could have parented different. He was just making bad choices. I was even battling my own father, who is an abstinent alcoholic, and he was saying, well, why can't he get his act together? You know?
That's so much to unpack there.
Oh, yeah.
And how does someone who doesn't know, because you just said, like, we're not educating ourselves in our homes, people are not being educated in schools. I think I've heard before, maybe even from you in some of your wise information, like there's no school program right now about just say no, mm-hmm. right? That's what we had when we were kids. Mm-hmm. And that it's not talked about enough. So when it does hit, the shame, the stigma, how do you move forward with that?
Because, I mean, we all think it's not going to happen
right
to our kid. I mean, I was a Sunday school teacher. I was his youth leader. We went on mission trips. We traveled. We were very involved. Later to come find out that's called enmeshment. Okay, it's a fine line between support and enmeshment. But I'd still do it. But, you know...
It can happen to anyone.
It can happen to anyone. It doesn't matter. Right. It doesn't, right, and especially now because the drugs are so potent, so pervasive, that you can get them. I mean, they could be Ubered to you. They're like pizza delivery people. Like, and the fact that, and it's because of the opiate crisis and all that, I think is what changed from our generation or age group to our kids' age group. But look, we can't mess around. It's not just pot. It's not just, oh, we stole a beer. I'm like,
right.
It can hit quick. Mm-hmm. It can hit quick because it's harder drugs. It's not benign, just, smoking behind the shed kind of thing.
Right. And not that can't cause problems also.
Oh, yeah.
But not to the same extent. So as you're going through this journey, and it was long, and you're still, luckily Carson's in a great place right now.
He is.
And I want our listeners to be able to see the smile, knowing that he is in a good spot right now.
Yeah.
But it's been a really long, hard chase.
Oh, yeah.
I've got teenagers. Mm-hmm. How do they deal with this with a friend? How do they go through this with a friend? we have known each other for a long time, but what could I have done to support you as you were going through this?
Well, we kept it pretty close until it was obvious that we needed help with the GoFundMe or the Plum Fund. But at the same time, word's getting out.
Well, because he hasn't been in school for a while.
Right. There's several times that he had missed 3 weeks at a time. His sophomore year, his end of his junior year, and then we're going into his senior year, and he overdoses. So he leaves the state he was 18 because he was an older senior. So one, we had to get him on board to leave the state. And one way we did that was we set the boundary, like if you continue to use or you go back to using after his stint of spending pretty much the whole summer before his senior year in rehab, I said, you can't live here anymore. I can't, the anxiety is killing me. What was happening is his use was progressing, that even the friends his good best friends that he grew up with in our school, it was a K-8 school, they were even starting to pull away. They didn't understand that it's a brain thing. Like, he couldn't stop it. He couldn't get his act together.
Because they know something's going on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, going back to your question of what you could have done, one of the biggest things was if you had known the extent of it, I'd say just by reaching out and saying, hey, I don't know how I can help. I just want you to know that I'm here. And we have lots of, close friends best friends and neighbors and family that just showed up. In fact, I have another part of the book I can read if you'd like about that.
Sure, I'd love that.
But they would just show up because, I couldn't tell them what to do because I wasn't quite sure, except for, sitting, when he overdosed at his bedside. But, I was like out of, I don't know, I was like at my wit's end. I don't know what to do.
Right.
So, as Carson sleeps, we sit next to his bedside and watch the monitor as his oxygen level changes, and his blood pressure remains horribly low. By now, I've filled all our friends and family in. They continuously text asking what we need, and they inquire if they should come over. We say no, not yet, but honestly, I wish someone would show up. Prayers answered, and my friends Michelle and Suzanne find their way to us, and I just break down at the sight of them. Julie, who had come to one of Carson's first times in rehab, she comes back after her shift to sit with Carson while Sloan and I have something to eat. As we are in the cafeteria, we miss more friends who are coming to support us. So going back to Julie, Julie is also my friend that is my oncology nurse, because I've been through breast cancer when all this started. Yeah, let's just add that to it.
Right.
And so I was texting the day of his overdose. Well, the first time that he went into rehab, he was high for 48 hours, and we were supposed to go out with our church group and just the couples, no kids, and go out for dinner. And we're like, something's wrong with Carson. He's gone off the rails. We're trying to get him into Fairbanks. We're trying to get him to the hospital, and we finally get him to the hospital that first time. And at 10 o'clock at night, they just show up, and one of the nurses in the ER, behind the double doors says, hey, there's some people out here that want to see you. And I see them, and I just collapse in their arms, because I'm like, this is just the first, of starting to chase him. And I wish I could have said it was just a one-off, and it was just, it was definitely bad choices but it unlocked that door,
Right. But your friends showed up.
But the friends showed up. Yeah. Yeah.
And you really needed that, because as you said, this was just the unlocking of the door.
Yeah.
And the first of that chase.
Yeah. And what that did show, just thinking of that, is one of the things is you don't want to ask for help. One, you don't want anybody to see your kid like this. And we're just at a loss. But when people do just show up, they're just saying to you, you know, it's kind of like going into your kitchen. And sometimes into your kitchen or your garage or your basement, you only, you know, you don't want people to see.
No.
And that's how it was. But they said, it's kind of like, we don't care. We're here for you. We love him. We love you.
Mm-hmm.
How can we help? And if it's just sitting in the ER room, you know, like my childhood friends, Susie and Shane, who are married and we grew up together, and same thing. They showed up at 5 o'clock in the morning the day that he overdosed, and we were waiting for the ambulance.
Wow. 5 a.m.
5 a.m.
That's a pretty special friendship right there to show you that they're here to help you through this.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to do it alone, even though you had it. It has to feel so isolating.
Oh, it is. And again, the shame from it. And you know, it's always, well, at least for me, it's easier to give than it is to receive. Mm-hmm. So this lesson in receiving a lot over those years, you know, is very humbling, and it is a lesson in how to do so, because people need help, and you have to accept the help that they're going to give, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Right.
So.
Well, and if people know what that help that might be needed is, they're willing to do it.
Sure.
But I think this is a situation where, again, there's no book out there right now that says this is how you help your friend as their family goes through addiction.
Right. Right, because
or maybe there is, and I just don't know what.
Well, you got a point. We can Google that later.
But your book is helping with that now, changing that stigma by having the conversation, and having the conversation with everyone to say, hey, this is what we did. This is how we went through it, and talking to our teenagers when they see if someone's out of school for 3 weeks. You're not out of school for 3 weeks just because you have COVID.
Right.
Right? Like this is something bigger, deeper.
Yeah.
It's unlikely that you're out of school for 3 weeks and then you come back and you're better.
Right.
And so supporting our kids as they see this happening.
Yeah, like if your son had come home and said, hey, Carson's been out of school for 3 weeks, we think it's because he, you know, took a bunch of Xanax and was high for 48 hours. You know, one is, and I've been there, I've had to change my mindset, you know. One of the things could have been, okay, well, you're not allowed to be around Carson anymore. But I'm going to here to tell you, that's not necessarily the case, because I've done it, Carson, too, because you always want to blame somebody. And you don't want we always think it's contagious, and it's not. But how can we help? How can we just have grace and love and go, hey, Mom, I think maybe the McCords are struggling. Carson, you know, took a bunch of Xanax, I heard, and was high for 48 hours, and he's in rehab right now. You know, what can we do?
What can we do?
Yeah.
And that is then me as mom saying, well, let's reach out and make sure they're okay with us reaching out.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. Like I'm guessing here based on your conversation and my kids then saying, hey, Carson, I'm thinking about you.
Right.
He probably doesn't have access to his phone and all of that kind of stuff while he's in rehab.
No, but you know what I remember this is that people and friends in our neighborhood and so on and so forth in our school reached out and said, is it okay if I write Carson a note and send it to him to let him know that we're thinking of him? And these are parents, not just the kids.
Sure.
I'm sure that when he finally did get his phone, he opened up Snapchat or Instagram and saw a bunch of, you know, well wishes, hopefully. But, you know, one thing is that letter writing, sending a note, you know, even when I had breast cancer, the notes that came in, the handwritten notes that we don't do a lot anymore, I was getting cards that, you know, kind of cheering me on, you know. Same thing with, you know, with Carson, when people were realizing, because sometimes I couldn't hide it because, you know, I worked from home, and if he was, later on after the first time, if he was going off the rails again, he's coming in from school or he's going out, and it's pretty obvious when he was on a bender, and my clients saw it, and then they'd reach over and they'd pat my hand, or they'd reach behind, because I did hair from home, and just kind of pat me, while I'm doing their hair, and I knew people cared, I did, but I just always say, just reaching out, just even if it's a little note, a little text, a voicemail.
Yeah.
And
then the money to help pay for this.
Well, yeah.
Which is, it sometimes feels weird.
It does.
To give people money, especially like if I don't know someone really well. Right. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I will, right?
Right.
But I'm like, oh, I don't know. Do they really need it?
Right.
So you did. Like, we did. This is exactly, and so reminding myself when I see these, like, people are not, like, they're only asking for help when they really, really need it.
Oh, yeah. We were.
Right.
Yeah. We had to get him out of the state. He had just overdosed and survived an overdose.
Wow.
And we don't know how long his respiration rate was low, but it was long enough that it caused him to have hearing loss. He wears hearing aids now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And for that first month, while we're trying to get him out of the state, also because of it, his injection fraction rate for his heart was like at 35%, and normal is 55%. And he's an athlete, and he's young, and his heart recovered, but that was from being without oxygen for a certain amount of time. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. One thing is, for us that need help and people that want to help, is that the people that are needing the help is to be okay with being transparent. And it's hard. Oh my gosh, it's so hard to ask for help because pride gets in the way, or you're afraid of being judged, or whatever, especially when in the case of addiction, which I'm hoping to change that narrative. But it's just to put it out there. And I put it out there on the Facebook when Sloan said yes, you could do the Plum Fund, and I said, look, and I shared the link, and I'm like, look, we have something that's happening that's dirty, that's not pretty, it's not a praise, it's messy, my son struggles with addiction, and he has just overdosed, and we need to send him away, and our insurance is running out, and we don't know what else to do.
That is so hard, and so brave of you, and so strong as a mama to say that nothing can get in the way of this. My pride be damned.
My pride be damned. And especially as mama bears, you go, I'll do anything to save my kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had other people are like, are you sure you want to, get a second mortgage? I'm like,
yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, what, I mean, at this point, college, like, I'm just trying to keep him alive. If I could use his college fund, which actually he didn't have much in it anyway, but
yeah, this is what you do.
Yeah, this is just what you do. You rob Peter to pay Paul,
and your whole life is turned upside down.
Yeah,
and everyone in your family's life was turned upside down.
Yeah,
and not even just your immediate family, right? Because the rest of your family is doing all this research.
Right.
Your extended family is helping you figure out where to go. Addiction doesn't just affect the person who is addicted.
Mm-mm. No, they say that for the person with substance use disorder, which includes alcoholism, is 8 to 10 people are affected. And I would have to say the same thing with mental health issues too.
Which also means, as you put this information out there, there's probably a lot of people who've been touched by this.
Oh yeah. And I bet all of us know somebody that's in our family or a close friend that struggles with substance use disorder, whether it's diagnosed or not, because usually only 19%, I don't want to quote I don't want to misquote anything, but not everybody gets help, you know? Like, there's 20 million suffering, well, there's 43 million suffering, 23 million people are in recovery. The other 20 million are probably out there silently suffering, is I think how it goes.
That's a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of people who are probably feeling that guilt and shame, and I don't want to tell people what's going on because my basement's got a lot of cobwebs and they should not come down and see what's happening.
Right. So for the person that's actually struggling with addiction, their confidence level is, I mean, they're belly crawling. And then for the family, that whether it's your child or your spouse, you're struggling in your confidence level because you can't fix them. You are helpless.
Mm-hmm.
You try and they're trying. They didn't choose to be addicted. He didn't smoke pot for the first time and say, oh, you know what? I'm gonna be an addict.
Right.
I'm gonna be a heroin addict.
Yet that's not what he was going out to do.
That's not what he was going out to do.
I want to make my parents take a second mortgage out.
Right.
No part of him wants that.
No. A lot of times it goes together with mental health issues and addiction. So what he found, just so a side note, that to keep an eye on your kiddos out there, is that around 6th grade he noticed a change in his thinking. And he was starting to think that he wasn't good enough. Now, this is the boy that walks around and he is too cool for school. Like, what? Like, he's an athlete, you know, plays football, and he was a catcher, and everybody was wanting him to be a leader, but deep down, and he wouldn't do it, so we thought he was just being obstinate. No, he didn't. His self-confidence was, and that was even before he started using. But then he starts using and goes, wow, that makes it feel better. I could go into class and do a speech if I just do a one hit.
Wow.
Yeah. So come to find out, social anxiety, generalized anxiety. He had an auditory processing disorder that they caught and worked on and rectified. And it had to do with his reading, and that was between 1st and 2nd grade. And I don't know. I mean, who knows? We don't know.
You don't know.
It's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's genes. My dad is, like I said, an alcoholic and abstinent, and my husband's dad was as well. So
there's a whole lot of reasons.
There's a whole lot of reasons.
It's a whole lot of stuff, but I think that conversation or that noticing, you're like, oh, they don't feel good enough now. Mm-hmm. Wow. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Oh yeah, especially as you go into puberty and the adolescent ages and middle school, and I mean it's tougher out there for them.
It is. And then as you said, the social media you can just have it delivered to your house. Mm-hmm. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's at school all the time.
Yeah.
And there's no way that anyone should expect administrators to be able to monitor all of this at any school, right? Like it's everywhere.
No, and it isn't. We could do that because we want to find someone to blame. Well, the school didn't do this, and we didn't do that, or in our own homes. Because even the boys said later, like, Mom, both of the boys said, you talked to us about alcoholism and addiction, but you didn't explain. And this is when I realized we for some reason, due to funding or whatever, we don't have a strong, or we didn't when our kids were in elementary school, a strong drug education prevention program. So they said we didn't know all the drugs that were out there. They learned it basically on their own and what it does. You know, because we couldn't. I didn't tell them. And again, how would I know to say, oh, this is what heroin is, and this is what it looks like, and you shouldn't do it, and because I didn't. That wasn't part of my upbringing.
Right, and I don't know.
No.
I didn't know that you could order it and have it delivered to your house like DoorDash.
Right.
I mean, it's so different. And I had no idea with all of that. Wow.
No. That's why it's just crazy. I'm still just, my mind is still just blown. Mm-hmm. And that causes me to change my direction in my life so that I can give back to those that have given so much to us, in a way kind of paying it forward. So I've changed career paths, and I'm a family recovery coach now. And, you know, my goal is to help other families and to communicate and navigate their adolescent or young adult substance use issues and mental health issues, because where do we go? And this is uncharted territory.
Right.
You know?
And talking about it.
Yeah.
And sharing these stories with our friends and our family so that we can be on the lookout for any of these patterns. We can start to have these conversations with our kids, with our family, to say, these are patterns that I'm seeing, or this is, what do you know about drugs in school?
Yeah, keep the conversation open with your kids, with the friends, with the parents, back and forth.
Right. Because how many of Carson's friends' parents were like, as you said earlier, oh, Carson's behavior is changing, my kid has said that, and I don't think you need to hang out with him anymore.
So none, that I know of, none of the parents were starting to think that. I think they felt sad for us. They felt sad for the boys, because as they saw their sons pull away from Carson, that made them sad. I know it did.
Of course it always
it does. And because they've seen Carson before he went down this road. Because these are his childhood, best friends. No, I would say that nobody shunned us, really. They, this was towards their seniors. They drive. They kind of were pretty autonomous. Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
No, that's great. No, that's really good.
Yeah.
I have to assume that because you did finally allow everyone to know and help.
True, yeah.
That, because if you hadn't taken that GoFundMe money, it might not have been as easy. You would have found a way probably, but it would not have been, okay, this is what we're going to do, and you're going out of state and you're going to get better. Because he had that support around him, and because you had the support around you, and you've allowed that support in while it was happening.
Yeah. It was a big relief to be transparent about it.
Oh, yeah.
It was such a big relief. And when you start seeing all the, people, the notes and the text messages and the cards in the mail and going, it was just a relief, because I finally could say, my son is sick.
Wow.
My son is sick. And it's not just because he's a bad kid.
Right, because he's not a bad kid. Because walking around all the time, when people are saying, hey, how are ya? You can't just put on a happy face on this.
Oh, yeah, you get an elevator kind of pitch going, oh, yeah, sure, yeah. Well, Carson's on his own journey, or Jack's going off to college, and,
Yeah.
You just kind of, because sometimes the stories are so crazy that no one would believe it, hence why I wrote the book. and two, people can't help it. They do want to help, and sometimes their help is advice on something they really don't know much about. So,
and not relevant to what's going on with you right now.
Right. And I don't, again, I'm not shaming them. I'm not blaming anybody. No. I mean, everybody means well. Everybody has good intentions. Nobody has malicious intentions.
Well, Dawn, thank you for continuing the conversation that you've already been having and sharing this with our listeners. But before we finish, I wonder if you would be willing to share 2 more things.
Sure.
And the first is when you have someone who you know and love and care about who's going through something, what is your favorite thing to do to support them? Because you've gone through a lot, so you know things that are good and bad. And
Yeah. Well, when we were, younger parents and raising kids, definitely the meals, because that definitely helps, especially when you're, raising kids and you have to feed everybody. Rides, oh my gosh, that helped. Especially when I couldn't drive for 3 weeks when I had breast cancer, and, people go in, because we didn't really do bus service for their high schools. So people would come in and say, and this was, Jack wasn't driving yet, and Carson was a freshman in high school. So that really helped a lot, is how can I get, your kids from point A to point B? I'm like, that would be really helpful. We've gotten older, because this has happened for us, and I'm finding that I like this, is if they have the time, is to going and cooking a meal in their kitchen, or bringing in carry out, but actually having that meal with them and being, kind of have some, be in relationship together and
having that connection in the kitchen while you're cooking for them.
Yeah.
That's really special.
And catching up. Yeah, that's happened. Someone's come to us because my husband was injured and on the job. And so they brought what do we have? Fajitas. And then we had a meal together and caught up. And that was really good. And that's kind of been the theme of my life, is just, God's just said, be in relationship with people. And so this is kind of, if time allows, if the situation allows, I always like to go there and to have the meal with them.
Oh, that's really special.
Yeah,
I really like that, Dawn. Well, the final thing in closing, what is the best thing that you have received through all of these journeys that someone's done for you?
I'd come home from taking him to, intensive outpatient, which is, one of the step downs. And so inpatient, partial hospitalization, and then IOP, which would be after school for 3 hours, 3 times a week. But I'd come home from dropping him off for 3 hours, and there might be just a small little basket or a bag with some goodies in it, or like we have some dear friends that he's a beekeeper, so I get honey, or one friend sold Zapata, and this was during my breast cancer, and there was just hanging on my door handle was this cute breast cancer awareness Zapata pendant.
Aww.
Just things that say,
just little deposits.
Just little deposits that say, hey, we're not, we're here. We get, at whatever level you need us, we're here, but you're not forgotten.
You're here, but you're not forgotten.
You're here, but you're not forgotten.
That's exactly right. Dawn, it has really been a pleasure. Thank you for opening up about your story. We'll have a link to your wonderful book and journey and chase of Carson.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.